Our correspondent Wyatt Sharpe sat down with Matthew Horwood from the Epoch Times to discuss the pivot that the federal election has taken in the polls and what has caused this shift.
So perhaps let's just start out. If we look to a few months ago, the election has really pivoted from where we were then. It seems as if, Pierre Poilievre being ahead in some cases back then, even by, 29% was, I think, the extent of it in some of these polls. Now you're seeing Mark Carney projected to win a majority government, perhaps even upwards of 200 seats. Again, really just a complete reversal of what we saw. Why is that from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a totally different election from a couple months ago, and I think there's three big factors. One would obviously be Justin Trudeau stepping down and Mark Carney becoming the prime minister, and then we have Donald Trump's threat of tariffs and using economic force to annex Canada. That, of course, has freaked out a lot of people, and I think it's led to a rally around the flag effect with a lot of people. They've seen a popularity of the leader come back, and then, of course, we have the carbon tax, which Pierre Poilievre had made the central issue around cost of living in the campaign, and on Mark Carney's first day in office, he reduces that to zero. So that really throws the Conservatives for a loop, and it makes it a lot more difficult to portray themselves as the best options for Canadians at this time.
And so do you think, by Mark Carney canceling the capital gains increase, canceling the consumer carbon tax, doing these types of things to disassociate himself from Justin Trudeau, while Pierre Poilievre still tries to make the connection to Justin Trudeau, well, there really isn't much of a connection to be made anymore. Is that part of the reason why the Conservatives have fallen behind, or is it just Mark Carney is a stronger alternative at this point?
Yeah, it's certainly a factor. I mean, we've seen Poilievre try to tie Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney and the legacy of the Liberals, and he makes the connection of, after the last 10 years of Liberals, of the Liberal government, Canada is broken. But, I mean, Mark Carney is an outsider. He was not in government, and I think that's why the Liberal Party chose him to be the leader. And so it makes it very difficult for Poilievre to make that connection. And I think, distinguishing himself by canceling the carbon tax, getting rid of the capital gains tax, not talking about the same sort of, maybe the Conservatives would call it woke issues that Justin Trudeau was focused on, that really makes it hard for Poilievre to pivot, and he has to change up his whole ground game in the way he portrays Mark Carney and tries to connect him back to the Liberals.
And just lastly here, if we're looking at kind of the two resumes of both Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney, that's something Mark Carney and the Liberals are talking a lot about, obviously, being former Bank of Canada governor, Bank of England, and then talking about Pierre Poilievre, who's been the MP for Carleton since he was 21 years old. Is that kind of a factor, or, again, are Canadians just more focused on looking at the issues and perhaps, at least, again, based off of the polls, assuming that Mark Carney has more fiscal experience to deal with some of these, issues that are kind of shaping our political climate right now?
Yeah, I think it favors Mark Carney in a lot of ways. I mean, being the former Bank of Canada governor for two developed nations, having a history at Brookfield Assets, a multi-billion-dollar company, that can be a liability because the Conservatives have been trying to tie that back to his assets and what he was doing while he was at Brookfield, his connections to the Chinese government. But at the same time, as the Liberals say, you have Pierre Poilievre, who only knows being in government. He's been in there for 20 years and he's a career politician, versus somebody like Mark Carney who, as he says, understands economics, understands how countries works, has a grasp on these larger issues. It looks a little bit more difficult for Poilievre to differentiate himself. But I think the issues around Canada and its relationship with the U.S. is the main issue. And when you have Donald Trump speaking with Mark Carney and saying after the phone call, it was a great phone call, we're getting along well, we're going to speak about this after the election, that makes it especially difficult for Pierre Poilievre to portray himself as the best person to handle that issue, especially when he can't be the one discussing these issues with Donald Trump. And that might just be the issue that cements this election as a Liberal minority or majority government.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Matthew Horwood, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Teresa, we'll send it back to you.